Okay, well, it's my pleasure to be here. First of all, the restroom is here, and I'm not going to block you from that. So if anyone needs to leave, I certainly understand, and it's just great to have everyone here together. It is my pleasure to be associated with this chamber, just as everyone else has said, and I'm going to just share a few perspectives and invite questions or comments from all of you, and I would like to avoid making a speech, which I'm perfectly capable of, so please help me. So when Ernie asked me to make a few comments about diversity and economic development and how that relates to New Mexico, it's a lot in this conversation. But what I'd like to start with is to remind us that diversity is important both from a public policy perspective and is a hot issue in business. So I'll share some perspectives in business, but before I do that, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the public policy perspective on diversity, which really is about social inclusion. And so when we think about New Mexico and we think about the challenges we have to include all forms of diversity, whether it's ethnic and racial diversity, whether it's economic diversity, obviously gender diversity, there's many different forms of diversity when we look at it from either a public policy or a private enterprise perspective. And the challenge from a public policy perspective, and the World Bank obviously leads the thinking around this, is how do you get all members of society to have access, equal opportunity, and that's a social inclusion exercise. So having said that, the types of things that economists talk about are the pyramid, the global pyramid. And the pyramid says, well, there's people at the top, whether you say the 1%, or let's go further, there's people at the top who do quite well. There's another group in the middle that we call middle income. Maybe middle income or poverty is very different in many countries. What has become fashionable for economists to talk about is the base of the pyramid. How many people are at a level of poverty around the world? And we have that in New Mexico also, obviously. And the challenge around the base of the pyramid is how to get more people to move up. And many things of globalization can be criticized for having been unequal. But generally the belief is, and the evidence supports this economically, that people have done better in recent years, post-World War II. We're obviously in a challenging moment right now with trends in nationalism. But generally all boats have risen, maybe unequally. And that's where we start. And that base of the pyramid, when we apply that to Mexico, the obvious challenge is, for example, how do our poor communities, particularly the Native American communities, and to some degree the Hispanic communities, get a chance to participate? This is where we talk a lot about the creative economy. And how do we, for example, get Native American art that our people are making on reservations to be recognized as authentic art and valuable, and rather than have somebody find a way to make knockoff pieces somewhere else and import them relatively inexpensively. So that's why you hear a lot of focus around the discussion of the creative economy and its importance to New Mexico. So moving a little bit away from social inclusion, when we look at the profile of the demographics of New Mexico, now talking a little bit about business perspective and economic development, what makes New Mexico unusual? It's not so much that we have the highest level of diversity, racial and ethnic diversity in the country. No, there are some states with higher levels of overall diversity. Where we do have the leading diverse populations is we have the highest percentage of Hispanics or Latinos. I'm always quick to say, hey, I'm Brazilian. I'd like to be included in the Latino conversation. But the highest percentage of Latinos and the highest percentage of Native Americans. And there's recent evidence that those of us who are from New Mexico, I am not from many places. I'm now proud to be from New Mexico. But there's recent evidence that many of us who are either Hispanic or Native American in New Mexico are actually both. So actually, when you look at the percentages, we lead the nation in Latino population and Native American population. Well, it's very important because when we look at economic development, the Native American community is challenged in many ways, in many nations. But when we look at the Hispanic community, there's some very interesting perspectives about the development of the Hispanic community economically in the United States. First of all, here's a question. How big is the U.S. economy? Gross domestic product. She's had my class. She's disqualified. Sorry? Not that much. $18 billion. So now you see the Chinese economy is of a similar size, the European economy is of a similar size. So we have the biggest economy in the world. How much of the economy in the U.S. is attributable to Hispanic business? Can you guess? U.S.? Sorry? Over $2 billion. So while the Hispanic population is growing to more than 20% of the U.S., the economy is already $2 billion. That is bigger than the economy of India, to give you an example. So there's real economic power in the Hispanic community in the United States. And that's being recognized. And what's more, entrepreneurs, the fastest growing ethnic segment of entrepreneurs is the Hispanic community in the United States. Whoa, hang on a second. New Mexico is 99% small business. New Mexico is 48% Latino. When we see that New Mexico led the Southwest in entrepreneurial growth in the last few years, yeah, we can say Albuquerque's mayor did a good job around innovation. University of New Mexico made an effort. Tom would say we have to do better, but that's okay. We've made some progress. But maybe it's attributable to the fact that we have so many Latinos. Also, when you look at the evidence around Latino entrepreneurship, what we know is that women entrepreneurs that are Latino tend to be more educated than non-Latino entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of evidence. Now, we haven't unpacked this from a New Mexico perspective, but the national statistics are encouraging and bode well for us in New Mexico from this perspective. So now let me switch to a business perspective. The first thing when you talk about diversity is recognize that small businesses are different from big businesses. And so in small businesses, what happens is generally we know the leader of the business or the family leadership of the business sets the tone around the business strategy, sets the tone around the business culture, sets the tone around diversity as well. And so when we have many Hispanic business leaders, we can expect them to be sensitive to the issues associated with diversity. When we talk about big business, that's where we've learned a lot more about the importance of human resources and the importance of diversity and inclusiveness in the success of business. So how does that work? Why is that? Well, to keep it short, what happens is that HR has become important to big businesses because you will remember in the 1990s the discussion of the war for talent, the recognition that unless we can hire the right people for a business, that we won't be successful as a business. So the war for talent led the CEOs around the world, this is not a US phenomenon only, around the world, CEOs over the last 10 years have said one of their top 3 issues is always talent and leadership, always. So it's very important to the success of the business. And so what's happened is large businesses have to be clear about their strategy with people. To use an example, you can differentiate your company based on your people. Use an airline example. Which airline do you think of immediately you associate with their people is going to give you a good customer experience? Which airline?
Southwest.
No, nobody else comes to mind. So they differentiate based on their people. Every other airline has to be good at people and meet an industry standard, but they aren't necessarily trying to differentiate. So the first point is have to be clear in your strategy about your people, whether you're differentiating or not. The other aspect we've learned about people in large business is that no business strategy will be successful. No business strategy. We know 70% of mergers fail, but no large business, and every CEO wants a new strategy because she's a new CEO. She's got to leave her mark on the organization, so we're going to have a new strategy. But what we know now, after 30 years of McKinsey advising companies on strategy, and everybody else in the consulting business getting into strategy, is that strategy is only successful if you engage your people. Not just develop it in the boardroom and send it down, but as Ernie has done, to engage the team in the discussion of what have we learned, where are we going. So this notion of not only having a clear strategy, but engaging your people in a top-down, bottom-up exercise, which we know now, any successful strategy takes as much as 2 to 4 years. So it's not a matter of launch it, communicate it, it's an iterative, ongoing measured process. So those are the reasons that HRs have become very important. And as a result, HR departments have become super specialized like any other department in a corporation. So you begin with sophisticated ways around recruiting, you do much more around compensation. It's not just pay people on a fixed pay, variable stock basis, but other forms of compensation and rewards, benefits, all kinds of other rewards. So you have compensation benefits specialists. And you have to help people learn and develop. So you have learning and development. So HR has become very specialized and grown to meet the demands. And what happens at the end of this story around HR is that all corporate functions are undergoing transformations because of the importance of process and technology. And your CEO is going to say to you, move all the transactional work to the back office in Las Cruces so that you can focus on being a business partner. Okay? So HR is also undergoing corporate transformation to move transactional work and do more value-added business advice around the houses of the business. So that's what's happened to make HR more important. Where does D&I fit into that? Well, sometimes D&I is diversity and inclusiveness when I say D&I. And sometimes that is considered part of the HR strategy for the business, and sometimes it's considered strategically separate and important. Why is that? Because businesses have learned that they want a culture and a mindset that is diverse and inclusive. And that's very easy to say, but very hard to achieve. If you think about it, having a culture, how many cultures does a company get to have? A customer-focused culture, a quality culture, an innovation culture. Connie would say an operational excellence culture. And then when they say, and I want a diverse and inclusive culture, to want it is one thing, but how to make that happen? So what happens in business is to make a diverse and inclusive culture. Every business is a bit different depending on where it's from. Here we are in New Mexico. We're going to be more naturally diverse because we grew up in this environment. And that's something we need to recognize and celebrate rather than downplay. But also it depends on industry. So the kinds of questions are diversity in a company end up being not just gender or sexual preference, but age. You can have engineers and non-engineers in some companies. So there are many physical capacity. There's many different forms of diversity. So as important as gender is, it requires a tremendous amount of attention because we know women are not paid what they're entitled to equally at all levels of organizations. That's evident from the statistics. So gender is extremely important, but it's not the only form. And so part of this is you need to support diverse groups, which end up being siloed, but then create an imperative around working together. So diversity is the mix, and inclusiveness is making that mix work together. So what they do is they embark on training. How many of you in diversity training? Put your hand. Okay. What does that training start with? Bias. The very first thing it teaches us is we all have a bias. Not just because of our gender, but the values that were part of our upbringing, etc. So you start with the fact that we're all biased. And therefore we come recognizing we all have a different starting place. We have to accept those differences and work towards the inclusive. So there's a whole process around education. The problem is, that's not enough. Why? What are you trying to change? Behavior. How do you change behavior? What behavior do you get? Behavior you measure. So if you don't measure it, you won't get it. So it's not enough to say we want to do this, we're all aware, we've had the training. What has to happen? So for other two business executives, what has to happen? I would say I've had this experience as an HR director. When you get the promotion list, when you get the salary increase list, make it blind as to all these diverse groups, whether it's gender, age, technical background, etc. And then you look at the diverse groups, and you find out we didn't do very well. And what do? You send it back. So until the line manager who runs the business day to day realizes that it's going to get redone if they don't do it right the first time, you won't get the behavior unless you measure it and change the measures. So the beauty of all this is that the story for us in New Mexico is that we're more naturally adept at some of these issues because we grew up understanding the differences, particularly amongst the Latinos and the Native Americans. I mean, we have different countries within our state. So we take that. The reason I'm here is that there's two places, and we tell this story before those of you who are on the board. The reason I'm here is there's two places in the United States I felt very comfortable. I'm not a very white guy. Manhattan was one, New Mexico's the other. Nobody cares where you're from here. And we don't have as many Asian Americans, we don't have as many African Americans, and that's why our total minorities aren't as large a percentage as others, but we lead the nation in Latinos and Native Americans. and lead the nation, one of the leaders amongst minority businesses. So what we do as a chamber is incredibly important to the Latino population in our state, and that's critical for small business. But what's really exciting is I think we have a platform that's interesting to large business as well. One, because of our understandings and our experiences, but two, New Mexico as a place to do business is underappreciated. Yeah, we have our challenges. We're not very business friendly. We don't get it. We downplay ourselves. But the reality is the infrastructure here, and if we would just get over the north versus south and realize if we could work together between what is in Santa Teresa and Las Cruces and what we have here in Albuquerque, that is very, very powerful because we sit at the junction of the major arteries of transportation in the country. We have a competitive cost base to do business, and there's a lot of other things that make this an interesting place from a logistics and manufacturing standpoint. So the story for me is not only is our work of the past in this chamber continues to be very relevant, and the excitement that's associated with this chamber is evident in the staff, in the board, in the members, and we feel like we're the vibrant chamber, and you hear that every day. Congratulations to the team. But what's exciting also is we have an opportunity, and Ernie's seeing some of this, of big companies coming and saying, we'd like to understand better how to do business in a Hispanic-led marketplace. And we know New Mexico is that standard. So we have a chance to, we might even get back to the future as the center of the Ibero-American universe. And I think what's interesting, from the last thing I'll say, is what's kind of neat for us around this, we have to recognize we're not leaders in overall minority, we're leaders in Latino and Native American minority. And we are the capital. This is what's cool. The National Hispanic Cultural Center is across the street from the chamber. The Gathering of Nations takes place in Albuquerque. If you're Latino somewhere else in the United States, or you're Native American, you want to go somewhere to celebrate your heritage, you come to New Mexico. And we tend to underplay that. So my last word is just, we are diverse. We have a lot to celebrate, not only for the small business community to serve and make a difference in every day right now, but an opportunity to support New Mexico's growth in large business. So that's the story. I know actually the truth of this story is all that Bernie has to make a speech like this in a couple of weeks. So this was a preview.
Right,
I have no guidance right now.
So that's the only perspective I'd like to share, and I'd like to open it up for any comments from your perspectives or questions, because I've lived this for a while, and this is the story of why New Mexico has even more opportunity from my perspective. Please, yes ma'am.
This may be slightly unarticulate, but
I think you're right. As far as New Mexico being very unique in the United States and within the world for Hispanic and Native Americans, we may not be at the top of everything, but we are at the top of who we are and what we do, and that is very significant. And I think that the more that we embrace that and capitalize upon that, the more successful we can be, because we can bring all of those that are under us into what we're doing. So I just want to add to that. Thanks.
This is the chamber that can make it happen. What else? Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
A couple of years ago, I was at a presentation with the Living Cities representative, and he was just trying to make some of the points Sam made today, but the one that stuck with me is by either 2030 or 2035, the rest of the country demographically looks like New Mexico today. So we've got a 10 to 15 year lead on the rest of the country, and the challenge is, what do we do with that?
That's where some of the businesses are coming to ask us. By the way, interesting fact is the Chinese have not invested in New Mexico at all. Now they have a huge plant from Taiwan and Foxconn on the other side of the border, and that's attracting a lot of activity. But what's interesting is if you probe into that a little bit, you'd say the Chinese should be comfortable here. We are diverse. They feel comfortable. Why don't they come here? Because we don't matter in Washington. That's why. They built $1 billion plant in Wisconsin in the jurisdiction of Paul Ryan. So we need Pete Dominici back, or we need to count Washington. But the reality is we're still a well-kept secret. Many people think we need passport and shots to come. That's from within the U.S. Or if I say to people I teach in New Mexico, they say Mexico City. So we have a lot to do. But it starts with being proud. And it starts also with telling the story. No one's going to tell this story unless we... Other comments or questions, please. Also, I want to keep you from either the restroom or the door. Yes, sir.
I think I want to touch on what he said about proud. I think me as being a young entrepreneur, top 7 convergence engineer in the world, I never took based on we're in New Mexico, we're this, we're that, we're Hispanic. I tell people at the end of the day I want to be the best across all boundaries. And I think that we do have an opportunity here because it's so hard to do business here. If you can conquer it here, you can conquer anywhere in the world, right? And so I think this is the proving ground. And so I tell people this, New Mexico is the modern day Sparta. And we don't have to be inclusive like the rest of the people. We can take the culture, we can take what we learned, what our families taught us. The handshake is a contract, and we can make that go a long way. So I think pride is where it counts, number one, in my opinion.
Others? Thank you. Well, again, it's my pleasure to just have a chance to share that perspective and support what you're doing. I am selective about where I spend my time. And here I'm teaching at the University of Mexico, and I'm proud to support this chamber. And there are other organizations that I'm not interested in supporting. So I'm all in with all of you. Thank you very much.